Should I lie against my right? My wound is incurable without transgression. Verse 6, he says, look, should I lie? They're calling me, this is in defense. Brother Maddox, he's saying, you know what? They're calling me a liar. I have done nothing wrong. I am just, and they're calling me a liar. Why would I lie about that? I'm not lying. I've had to deal with all this attack, and they're calling me a lie? No, you know what he's saying. What he said, for Job has said, I am righteous, and God hath taken away my judgment. Brother Ron, he said, God's not dealing just with me. I have done right, and he is not giving me what I deserve. Instead of blessing in my life, look how I live my life. But instead of blessing in my life, I have suffering. He's denying me my right. He's denying me what I've earned. If you do these things, your life should be this way. Job has gotten to the place that his complaint is, I am not getting treated by God like I deserve. I have supported him. I have. And I believe this is the beginning. This is such a subtle attack. I would never do that. Job didn't see it either. Let me tell you, this attack started in Genesis chapter 3. Satan said, God's holding out on you. Ron, he has better and you're not going to get it. Let me just go, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, although we could. But brother, even if that was true, even if God was holding out on him, God's the creator, Adam's the creature, he's the created. He's owed nothing. He's deserved nothing. He's getting treated better than he deserved. But even if that was true, the whole idea that I deserve to be treated differently is a problem. It is self-exaltation. It's idol of me. And this is usually how it comes. This is how it starts to work in our brain. We tend to believe something like, if I clean up my life, if I dress right, and if I talk right, and if I just do right, if I go to church, these days you have to add, if I vote right, if I just do right, then God's going to take care of me. Brother Ron, that sounds good, and I do not have any problem with that. Because you know what? That's a promise. But then we tend to describe what taking care means. Taking care means security. It means I'll have a nice comfy life. It means there'll be smooth sailing. And so just when trials come, it's like, what's wrong in life? We forget all those verses that promises if we live godly, we will suffer persecution. We forget those verses that say they're going to despitefully use us. We forget all those verses, and we're shocked when trials come. And then we have doubt, because why would God let this happen? And then we have some anger. And then we have some blame, because he's not treating me right. This is where Job is. This is exactly where we are in this book. And this, why would I lose my job? Why is cancer here? Why is, what if? Why not? In those questions, it's why am I not getting it my way? And that's what Job, that's exactly the picture he's at. And he comes to the conclusion that God is at fault. Now, before we take a look at at Elihu's rebuttal, you have to remember the beginning of this book. Here's Satan's claim. I will make him curse you to your face. You've coddled him, you've babied him. They serve you for what they can get. You let me in there, God, and Job will curse you. Now, Job's not there yet, but he's certainly on the road. Okay. Now, and he's not going to get there. I very much believe he doesn't get there, because God will not suffer us above what we're able, and he'll make a way. And you know what the way is here? It starts with Elihu, and then it ends with God himself. But Bill, he knows what you and I can take. Now, he's concerned with scraping that dross off. with melting it down and getting the impurity out. He's going to grow us up. He's a good father. We're not going to emotionally blackmail him to do it our way. We're not going to whine and guilt him into giving us what we want. He's the good father. And he's not quitting. And so, that's why I believe Elihu is an answer to prayer. On that road, some things have to happen first. First, Satan has to get Job to distrust God. Well, he did that. And that starts with bad expectation. It wasn't that God didn't do what he said he was going to do. It wasn't that God treated him unfairly. It was that Job had a bad expectation of, if this, it equals that. Job refused to let go of the dross. Job's holding on to bad theology. God's going to get it away. And after he has to get him to distrust, then he's got to get him to blame God, which, it's unfair. I deserve better. I'm not getting what I owed. And that is very close to cursing God, quitting on God, turning away. So Job's close, but he isn't going to, and he doesn't, because God intervenes. And he sends Elihu, and then God confronts, and Job hears, and Job makes a choice to see God for who he is, to trust God, to obey God, to surrender, and that's what God's looking for. Verse 7 and 8, so we can get going. So he starts the question, listen to me, hear my words. He said, here's the problem. Job, you've said that God's unjust. Verses 7 and 8. What man is like Job, who drinketh up scorning like water, which goeth in company with the workers of iniquity, and walketh with wicked men? Job, you know what? You sound like the wicked right now. You sound just like them. You're blaming God, you're attacking God, you're saying God's unjust. What kind of God do you have? How do you picture God? You sound just like the wicked. And then verse 9. For he hath said, it profiteth man nothing that he should delight himself with God. Here's the second. Job, you're doubting God, and you're saying, not only is God unjust, but it's no value, it's no purpose, it's no gain to even serve God. Why? Why do it? If there's no guarantee, Bill, you hear what he just said? If there's no guarantee of good treatment, why do it? Job, you sound like exactly what Satan's accusing us of. You do it only for what you can get. Now that's the second thing we're going to deal with if we get time. But at first, Elihu now begins to, in verses 10 and 12, he begins to roll out defense of God's character in this first attack. And the first attack is God's not just. Verses 10 through 12, therefore hearken unto me, ye men of understanding. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should commit iniquity. For the work of a man shall not he render unto him, and cause every man to find according to his ways. Yea, surely God will not do wickedly, neither will the Almighty pervert judgment. And this is poetry, so it's kind of confusing, but he simply just says, God is just. You cannot sit right here and accuse God of not being just, of not treating you justly. God cannot go against his very character, and his character is justice. You keep saying, okay, God doesn't know. Okay, I get it. I get it, Job. You're not going to shake your fist at God. You're that smart. You haven't got that far down the road. So you make up this excuse like, God is unjust to me because he doesn't see. But brother, he can't be unjust. Theologically, whatever God does is the measuring stick. It is justice. It is right. If God does it, it's right. That's how we have right. He is the moral authority. God, without exception, is always going to do right. He can't do anything else. Job, you are tearing down his character. If he chooses to do it, it's defined as just. He goes on in verses 13 through 15. who hath given him a charge over the earth? Or who hath disposed the whole? He says, who does God answer to? Who gave him the recipe to make man? Who said he's in charge of the earth? Who does he have to check with before he does something? Who gives him the law of what's good and what's not? Job, does he have to check with you? He says, if God would remove all of his essence, man lots of times runs around and lots of times, just leave me alone, let me live like my way. Well, Brother Ron, if God would remove himself in every entity from this earth, okay, this is where people want. Do you believe God is up there saying the sun needs to rise? I believe at least this. That's a law God created. That law continues because God created it. If God would remove his essence, then that law is no longer a law. It doesn't have to create. There doesn't have to be any more oxygen. There doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be anything. God removes his essence, we all die immediately. Life comes from him. Science is nothing other than figuring out his laws. Those laws continue because of who he is. Amen. If he removes himself, as we sit right here and say, God, I just want to live my life my way and I want it to be okay. Well, you're not God. And you really don't want him to remove it. Because with all of your whining and complaining, the only thing that gives you breath and allows you to whine and complain is him. You're complaining against the very essence that allows you to complain. Oh, he's a pretty smart guy. God is beyond accountability to man. We don't get to tell God that he's not doing just. I don't get to tell him he's not doing right. Not doing right. Needs to be this way. Although so often we try to do that. I'll say this too. Brother Max, I don't really have a problem with that if we're saying that to him. Because something happens in prayer. If we just get on a knee and start to have that conversation, somewhere in that conversation, he reveals himself to be God. And I usually change my mind. Amen. But Job was saying this to his friends and everybody would listen. In fact, remember he was saying, I can't talk to God. He's removed himself from me. His anger, his bitterness, his I deserve better had him not talking to verses 16 through 20 in this chapter. Actually, let's see, 16 and 17 maybe. Maybe that'll give me enough. If now thou hast understanding, hearken this. Hearken to the voice of my words. Shall even he that hateth right govern? And wilt thou condemn him that is most just? He goes on in this little paragraph passage right here. And Bruce, what he's really saying is, all right, not only does God not answer to you, but even if he did, man can't even stumble on justice. You can't even come close to what's right and what's wrong. How in the world are we going to evaluate God, who doesn't answer to us anyway, but what are we going to evaluate him by? We change what's right every other day. We can't decide, well, I think the United States is the greatest country on earth. I think it is the greatest country on earth that has ever been. With arguably maybe Israel. But they were just so rebellious. I think you could make it into an argument. And nothing dies harder than the desire to think well of oneself. And since I'm an American, I want to argue for my side. But Justin, it doesn't take much to look at our history. Let's see, we have segregation, and we have slavery, and we have rebellion, and we have abortion, and we have the mistreatment of women, and we've had legal plunder. Let me take from you and give it to somebody else, which is nothing other than theft. We have legislative, righteous theft. And look at the things we argue and fight over, and look at the things we've argued and fought over for 250 years. Greatest picture of man, I think, ever. And how do we define what's right? We elect people who can't agree on a single thing to nominate people that they can vote on who can't agree on a single thing based off a document that they've been trying to tear apart for 250 years to come up with something that'll be challenged in 30 years. Oh, so we get committees. Max, we get committees. We nominate committees to investigate. We raise funds so that they can investigate. Then we ask questions. Then we come up with a conclusion. And then we find out that the committee was compromised by the money, and we have to investigate the investigation. I wish it wasn't true. But this is the point he's making. I'm not trying to get political. I'm trying to help you. He's making this point. Job. Even if man did have some kind of responsibility to answer and to call into, how in the world are you going to do it? Apart from God, there is no measure of right and wrong. He doesn't answer to you. You can't even come close to deciding what's right. But yet you're trying to hold him accountable. He's unfair. He's unjust to me. I deserve better. We can't find truth. We can't find right. We can't evaluate God. So Job's answer, well, it wasn't he was wrong. It was that he didn't see and he didn't know. Verse 21. For his eyes are upon the ways of man, and he seeth all his goings. There is no darkness, nor shadow of death, where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves. He's always right, and he sees everything. God knows what's going on. 26 through 30, he says God's going to judge. He is going to judge. 31 through 33. Surely it is meet to be said unto God. Wait a minute. Now, Brother Ron, I want you to listen to this. It's going to sound good. Ready? Surely it is meet, it's good, it should happen to say unto God, I have borne chastisement. I will not offend anymore. You know what he said? He said, I did something wrong, and you've chastised me. I see the error of my ways, and I'm going to work really hard so that I don't do that anymore. That sounds good, right? That which I see, not teach thou me. If I have done iniquity, I will do no more. You've taught me already. I'm going to do nothing. Take it away. I won't do it anymore. Should it be according to thy mind? Here's his answer to Job. Job, should it happen on your time, on your request? Job. You're not the teacher. God's the teacher. Well, if all this is true, if you're going to him humbly, you're surrendering, you're seeking, you want his will, right, Justin? Don't that mean you trust him? So how are you stuck in this place where you don't trust him and you doubt him and it needs to happen now? Take it away! Or you're not. You missed the part. You're not God. See, it sounded good. It's like that little kid. I'm sorry you did it. I'll never do it again. I got to get in my room as soon as I close the door. Like that little kid who's only 4 years old and he's doing the same thing. He's only 53 years old and he keeps doing the same thing. He's not concerned with our reformation. He doesn't want to reform us. He wants it gone. He wants to renew our mind that it doesn't make sense anymore. He wants a humbled, surrendered relationship with him. Not reformed, cleaned up person. That's what he's trying to teach him here. Reformation is not what he's after. It's repentance. He wants surrender. He wants trust. He wants dependence. Verse 35, I think. says, Job, you didn't even know what you were saying. This is what you were saying. Take it away. Make it easy. You weren't looking at God. You did not want God. You wanted comfort. Job had spoken without knowledge, and his words were without wisdom. Yeah, no understanding. You weren't seeking him. There you go. So my desire is that Job may be tried until the end. My desire, just stay in there until the heat is hot enough that you want God, not relief. Whew, that's tough to pray right there. That's tough to pray this way. Brother Maddox, that's really tough. Lord, keep me in here until I learn. No, that's really tough to pray. It's really tough to pray this way. Lord, keep my child in there until they... I mean, that's just tough. You know the only way you could do that, Justin? If you saw a God who was always just and who was always loving. Meaning everything he did was out of love. Meaning everything he did was going to be just. Meaning that he loved that child more than you and I could. How big we see God will very much depend on how we respond to suffering. Remember when you get to the end of this book, the end of this book is this. I used to know you by the hearing of the ears, but now I see you, now it's face to face. Justin, that's what he wants. Let's clean all this crud out. All this stuff you've made me, all this idolatry. See me for who I am. Love me for who I am. I'll love you for who you are. That's what he wants. Relationship. So he deals with the first. He deals with the first challenge in chapter 34. Chapter 35, he begins to deal with that second one. There's no value in living righteousness. 35, 1 through 3. Thinkest thou this to be right? Let's see. 1 through 4, he basically says, I'm a little long-winded. Give me a little bit more time, and I'll answer the other one. I like that part, by the way. Brother Ron, I have it highlighted because I wanted to talk about it, because he says, I'm not done talking yet. Verse 5, he begins to deal with this idea. This idea, where you do, so God must. Verse 5, it says, look unto the heavens and see, and behold the clouds which are higher than thou. So, Brother Bill, here's where he starts to go. Look at the clouds. Look at the clouds. What can you do to affect the clouds? Can you touch them? Can you make them go away? Can you make them bigger? Can you make them smaller? Can you do anything that affects the clouds? No. Verse 6. If thou sinnest, you know what he's about to say? So it is with God. You know what you do to make him greater? Nothing. You know what you do to make him smarter? Nothing. You know what you do to make him more just? Nothing. He is who he is. You know what you can do to affect him? To change him? He's immutable. He never changes. Job, this whole idea of you do this so it's going to affect God and he must. Okay? He's not dealing with you because he's petty and you hurt him. He's not dealing with you because you manipulated him. You know what you can do to affect him? Your whole argument is illogical. What kind of God do you have? You've got a God of your own making, and he's not God. Usually the God of our own making is so weak. The God of our own making, we're in control. We manipulate, we motivate, we get response. How can God be unjust? Your whole argument is just crazy. How can he deal with you unfair? Verses 9 through 12. Why is God silent? Well, let's see. Why is God silent? He says in this passage, the people cry out in distress all the time. Lots of people cry. They say, take it away! Here, by reason of the multitude of oppressions, they make the oppressed to cry. When pressure comes, we cry out. They cry out by reason of the arm of the mighty. God makes us cry out. But they don't say, "Where is God, my maker, who giveth songs in the night?" They don't want God. They're not seeking God. We cry out. They cry. But they cry, verse 12, because of the pride of evil men. They cry out, "I deserve this. Take this away. Me, my life should be better. It should be smoother. It should be easier." Why is God silent? God is silent because you're not seeking him. You're not seeking God, you're seeking gifts. It's the picture of the Santa Claus God. All right, now it's the question, what do we want? Do we want God? Or do we want God to rubber stamp our value, our view, God's ways are not our ways. God's wisdom is not our wisdom. And lots of times that's what we want. All I want is God to do it my way. You see how the two build? You're not God. Justin, you're not God. God's God. Do you want him? Or do you want Santa Claus to open his bag and make your life what you want it to do? And he's so easily manipulated that all you have to do is sit on his knee and say the right things and dress the right things and vote the right way and show up on Sunday, and then you tricked him. You're a pretty small God. A whole lot of Americans have a pretty small God. Later in this chapter, and we're done, later in this chapter, verses 9 through 12, he says you got two options. You got two options. There's two options when you're in persecution. You can seek God. You can turn your heart to him. You can skim off the dross. Or you can deny him. You can get angry. You can sin more. You can get to the place where you say, "What's the use?" Job, guess which one you've chosen so far? You've said, "What's the use?" Now this is what happens. Usually we say, "What's the use?" And verse 13, "But the hypocrites in their heart heap up wrath." We get angry. We quit. They cry not when he bindeth them. We don't even look at him anymore. We don't give him credit. We don't think about him in the hard times. They die in their youth. That's because we're living hard. They live hard lives. They chase self-fulfillment apart from God. But let me tell you, that destroys life. It also destroys the life of everyone close to you. Sin, when it's finished, bringeth forth death. And we try to solve this problem with more sin. They die in their youth, and their life is among the unclean. Let me tell you, that's an ugly word right there. You look that word up, that has something to do with sexual unclean. In fact, if you look at weaker translations, it's going to talk about prostitution right there. This is what you do. You seek after self-fulfillment out there because you refuse to acknowledge God and let him skim off the dross. That's where we're at. We get to choose how we're going to respond to suffering. It's going to cause us to grow and to surrender and to depend. Is it going to bring us closer? Or are we going to choose to sin in arrogance and wrath and anger and blame? Well, let me tell you, inside the church, we do that and it's still nice and clean. We put on the clean clothes, we say the right things, we find the group is going to agree with us, we attack that group, we do this, and there's no growth. There's no God. Elihu is attacking the problem that has been since the garden. And he started by saying this: Justin, you and I, we need to consider these words. We need to see how we're going to respond. We close in a word of prayer this morning. Sure, Brother Jeremy.